I'm so tired of being alone. I'm so tired of on my own. Won't you help me, boy?
If you're going to start a relationship, this is not the time to do rapid serial dating. Quote unquote, Dr. Bonnie Henry, the Minister of Health for British Columbia. She also said, if you don't have ready-made people in your bubble, this is a time that can be even more lonely. Single in the time of Corona. The added onus of being in one's own company, morning till night, day in and day out, without a kind word or a caress, can lead to symptoms of mental breakdown, such as talking to oneself or perhaps even to one's appliances. Isn't that right, sweetie? You can always expand your social life by joining Zoom meetings. There are Zoom meetings about everything under the sun. You never realized how jolly Hungarian folk music was until you see 25 faces staring back at you from little squares, all beribboned and bedazzled, singing in unison, Olyan szép kék szemed van magának. In the PC, pre-corona days, loneliness was kept at bay by meeting friends for dinner, theater, a movie, with the online fishing pole always thrown into the pond with that little quiver of hope. But now it's just me, getting older, fatter, and grayer by the day. I'm like a science experiment with the absence of hair dye, acrylics for my nails, and certainly the gym. And yes, I could exercise at home as hard as I do in the gym with my trainer. But really? I mean, look how pretty these weights look in their box, all organized. Seems an awful shame to mess it up. My exercise ball has taken up residence in the dining room, where it quivers ever so slightly as I pass it on my way to the fridge. Then there's lighting. Zoom is not flattering. I find myself trying not to stare at my face looking back at me with its marionette lines like Chucky the Killer Doll. The sallow skin and small eyes that gaze back at me are mesmerizing. As an aforementioned science experiment, I wonder what's going to happen to me in 21 days or 47 days or as long as this whole thing takes before I decompose into a sack of wrinkled flesh. This is not a good state of mind for a hookup, especially since my first encounter will probably include wearing a mask, which of course does not lend itself to kissing, which by the way is strictly verboten. We will survive without kissing. We will have plenty of time in our lives to get to those things. It's time for us to think about the greater good rather than our instant and personal gratification. Jess O'Reilly, sexologist, as though she is surviving without kissing. But think of the role that the eyes will play in the uncharted world of coupling PC. Penetrating looks that we can send across the 2-meter gap between our bodies. When we smile at something that the other has said, our eyes will crinkle in a charming manner and convey pleasure to our potential mate. If, on the other hand, we don't understand what the other person is trying to convey, which is very possible considering that we're thrown together by an algorithm that stems out of hopefulness, if not actual desperation, one can tilt one's head to the side quizzically and open said eyes much wider to indicate receptivity for clarification. However, if the meeting is a washout and the idiot is saying things like, well, Trump is good for the economy, it is permitted to take a giant step back, perhaps in a dash towards your car. If at this point said idiot continues and says something along the lines of, what's a pretty woman like you doing on a dating site? You too independent or something? It is perfectly acceptable to mimic vomiting Raise your middle finger as you retreat with your ass going into the distance. Now, if you should be so lucky that the person who shows up is handsome, funny, and seems to take pleasure in your company, which will be obvious by the sincere gaze shining above his mask as he gazes upon your visage, you might considering opening your windows to the world and emanating a stream of hormonal energy, or spiritual, if that's how you swing. In those distant pre-corona dating days, the moment of no return usually happened on the third date. One or the other would invite the prospect over for dinner, and sometimes there would be a disrobing of clothing and naked commingling. But as Dr. Bonnie Henry has pointed out, we must exercise much more patience, and that is a long ways down the road. The big reveal in today's dating world is a removal of the mask and showing the entire face. Now, if you do this without any preamble, it could be a shock. So I advise that perhaps we can staple pictures of ourselves in front of our masks. This is for the charming, innocent look. Now, if you're dating an intellectual, you might want to show your more learned side. If you're going out with a biker or somebody who's more street savvy, why not show them your tough mama look? Either way, if you do disrobe your entire face and the other person likes what they see and you like what you see, perhaps you're off to the races. If the shock of exposing your entire face is a pleasurable one, you can take the next step and hold hands, with latex gloves, of course. Happy safe dating, everybody.
Find an understanding anyway. We're lost in this mess.